I'm terribly unprepared for this, so you'll have to forgive me while I wing it. I have about 10 minutes that I actually planned to do, and about 20 minutes that I can just extemporize, and we can start questions whenever you want. Because the name of the conference is fun, I want to talk about a couple of definitions of fun that I'm familiar with, share them with you, and let you think about them. They're not the only definitions that there are, but there are a couple of different axes that overlap to help you sort of bound a definition of fun. The first one is from Ralph Koster's book called The Theory of Fun. I don't know who's read that, but just to oversimplify one of his main theorems in that book, fun is what you're having between when you're confused and bored. This is a theorem that basically applies to one-player games. That's sort of what game design is if you're a computer game designer, at least it was back in that time. And confusion happens when you don't understand what's going on, you don't know what choices are available to you, and so therefore you have no real reason to try any particular one. You're confused because you're like a rat in a maze and you don't even know which way to go. That's not fun. Then you have fun, maybe not for very long, and then you realize that you've seen the whole maze, or maybe you just think you've seen the whole maze, and then you're at the other end of the spectrum, which is, I'm bored. Now I know everything this game has to offer me. I'm done exploring this space. All the time that you spend in the maze, that's the fun part of the game. And sometimes that can go on forever. Really good games. I'm this guy, too. Really good games keep you in that flow state where you're always feeling, at the same time, like you're competent to make choices and interested in what results you get. I'm that guy, too. Jordan, get off my screen. They keep putting up your picture behind me. So that's one axis of this graph. The other graph is from Dave Howell's theorem, which probably nobody knows because he hasn't published a book yet, but he's a good friend of mine, and I help him with a series of lectures where he talks about game analytics, mostly in the multiplayer game space, mostly in the board game space, which is where I'm more comfortable working. And he says that a game ceases to be fun if a player feels like he doesn't have a reasonable chance to win. That's an interesting theorem, and I'm going to break that down for you a little bit. Feels like means he doesn't have to be able to prove it. It may be false that he feels like he has a reasonable chance to win, but as long as he feels like he does, he's still engaged in the game. And reasonable doesn't mean equal. It means reasonable. If you're behind, you probably don't think you have an equal chance of winning as the guy who's ahead. It would feel dumb, in fact, if you did feel like you had a 50% chance halfway through the game. So reasonable means I'm a little behind, but I can still win this. If you think about that axis and the other axis sort of creating this bounded space in the middle of the graph, that is where the fun lies if you, from those two perspectives. And I'm done. I just started writing a game design book, and I tried really hard. I've had the month off, but I've been so busy that I haven't really got past the outline. But one of the things that I've talked about is a definition of fair for one-player games. It's sort of impossible to do it. I'm going to explain to you a one-player game, and then I'm going to ask you if it's fair. You roll a d6, and on a 6 you win. Is that fair? What did I just do? I asked a question that can't be answered. There's no definition for fair in a one-player game. Is it fun? That's a different question. Actually, the answer to that game is demonstrably yes, that is fun. And you can play the game, and you roll 3 5s, and you're like, come on, get a 6. It's very simple, and a lot of games are based on this basic principle, but much more complicated. And when you hit the 6, you enjoy hitting the 6 because you kind of had a sense all along how hard it was going to be. What about if you win on anything but a 2, on anything but a 1? If you have to roll a 2 or higher, you win. Is that fair? Well, it's just as fair as the other one was. But is it fun? Actually, for some people, yes. But probably not as fun. And actually, just with that D6 game, I made a rough guess that I could define a band of funness for one-player games that was basically between 1 and 6 and 5 and 6, as that's a fun zone to play in. I'll play that game. There are games where you're very, very likely to win. Bejeweled is a game where you're likely to win. If you define winning in the context of that flow state game that never really ends, all you have to do to win that game is find a move. What are the odds of that? They're huge. But that game has different definitions, different levels of winning. So yeah, you found a move, but maybe it wasn't the best move. There's a whole bunch of gradation between the baseline of winning and the best you could possibly do. That's usually where you find your exploratory space in a game where you almost always win. There are casino games that you hardly ever win. It's a lot harder than 1 in 6 to win the jackpot on a slot machine, but the really good ones have a win frequency that's higher than 1 in 6. You will hit something more often than that. So you can think about the jackpot, and you can imagine spending that money, and you could probably never win it, but you still have fun and you are engaged in the game because you're sort of exploring the space of what the slot machine can do. As soon as you get bored by it, it's because you basically feel like you've seen everything. People don't really play slot machines to win. This is a strange thing to say, but the way you win at gambling is to make your bankroll last as long as it can. A game designer would look at that and say, but you lost. But the gambler says, no, I had a lot of fun. Right? I made my $20 last for 3 hours. Let's see you do that. The gamer's like, watch me. I'll make it. I'll last forever because I'm just leaving. I'm not going to play these games. But if it mattered who won, people would not gamble. People gamble because the gambling itself is fun regardless of whether they actually win or not. So my background is mostly in designing multiplayer games, mostly in designing board games. I've done a little bit of computer game design. And I do actually want to open it up to questions and talk more about what I brought, because that is what I brought. Do you want to inquisit me, or do you want to open it up to the audience?
I will be the inquisitor.
Bring it.
So tell us a little bit about Dr. Lucky.
I hate him, and I want him to die. Who knows the game Kill Dr. Lucky? Okay, that's the very first game that I published through Cheapass Games, 1996. Thank you. And it only proves that I did most of my best work when I didn't know what I was doing, because it continues to be one of the better sellers from that product line. We knew that it was the best of the lot. I designed about 6 games to be part of that product line originally, and we put Dr. Lucky at the top of the list. And it is a good example of story-informing game design. I have always advocated, though I have not always practiced this, I have always advocated that it is easier to design a game mechanic that is based on a story that you like than the other way around. If you want to design a game with a mechanic first, or even a format first, it is going to be more difficult halfway through the process to come up with a story that fits it than to start with a story that you really like. And that's because the story is the harder part. A really good story is hard to come up with. A good game mechanic is something that you can borrow from another game if you have to, or that you can probably come up to fit perfectly to the story that you like. And Kill Dr. Lucky was a title first. And as soon as it was a title, it was a rough story, and that rough story was based on classic murder mysteries and the Clue game and Murder by Death and the Clue movie and all of the things that are associated with that genre where, okay, here's my premise. Everyone in the house wants to kill Dr. Lucky. Do I care why? No. We toyed with the idea, in fact, Dave Howell was one of the co-designers on this game. We toyed with the idea of forcing you to get a motive and an opportunity and a weapon, like these are the 3 ingredients of murder. We threw a lot of game mechanics at that, but getting a motive out of the deck seemed a lot less fun than just pretending you had one and making it up. Letting the rules be light means role-playing can happen. People can just tell stories while they're playing that game, and they really enjoy it. The next mechanical question was, what is it going to be? Is it going to be a card game or a board game? I'm working on a card game version of it right now, actually, but originally we said, let's make it a board game. It's a map of the house. Well, that's pretty obvious. How do you win? Kill Dr. Lucky. It's right there in the title. Okay. He's lucky. He's hard to kill. So you can try a lot, and he's going to get away. All these mechanics fall out of the idea that it's funnier if you try to kill him a lot and fail than if you only get to try once and always succeed. How do I know I can kill him? Do I need a weapon? I worked on Magic the Gathering for quite a long time, and I kind of realized that it's difficult to have a way to win that requires that you get a certain card in your hand. So no. Because otherwise the deck has to be full of that card, and it might as well not be there. So there are weapon cards, they help you, but you don't really need one. Okay, that's that problem solved. What else can I do? Part of the story is that I don't know that I'm not the only one who wants to kill him. If everyone just wanted to kill him, they would work together and they would kill him. Game over. So, all right, I think I'm the only one who wants to. What does that mean? That means I don't want anyone else to see me attempt to kill him, okay? So now we actually have a use for the board because every room has sight lines that leads to some other rooms. If I can be seen by someone in another room, I'm not allowed to try. The game just says I'm not allowed to. Maybe I'm really, really angry, but I still can't try it. That is one of the principal game mechanics in that game, and it would only have come from exactly that story. I'll give you another example. We're going to do a combat game. In this combat game, your goal is to kill everyone else. And you do it not by hitting them, but by leaving landmines around a track. Now, as you walk around the track, you can leave a landmine wherever you want, and it hurts you a little bit to leave it there, but when someone else lands on it, it's going to hurt them, well, actually less than it hurt you. But eventually, enough people will land there that you're going to hurt them more than they hurt you. And if you leave enough landmines together, then you can hurt yourself even more to make them do more damage. Do you want to play this game? Neither do I. But it's called Monopoly. The story of that game is not about killing everybody. It's about buying properties and cheating them on the rent. It's about getting rich. Really, it's about getting rich. It's also about bankrupting your friends, but it's about leading the life of a rich real estate mogul. And from that perspective, the same game mechanic that I just explained to you makes perfect sense. That's the reason I think story needs to come first, because good mechanics reinforce that story, and the story helps you remember how the rules work. They aren't just two disjointed parts of the same product. Yeah, that's Kill Dr. Lucky. Thank you very much. What else do you want to know?
I want to ask a bit about the boredom and confusion thing, because Brian was talking about how games keep you in the moment. To some extent, I think boredom and confusion pretty well describes life. Is fun something that gets you out of the boredom and confusion of life?
Yeah, that's interesting. I just saw Brian's definition of fun a couple days ago at Login, and I thought that it also, anything that keeps you in the moment also sort of applies to torture, although it does say, he does say it's voluntary, so I guess that we get to leave that one out. But I haven't really absorbed that definition yet. I don't really understand it. I think that people say that they play role-playing games in part to have a fantasy, to be somewhere else and not who they are. So is that the same as being in the moment? Can you be both of those at the same time? Probably, but I just don't know.
Yeah, I think the boredom and confusion thing. So, yeah, I'm not sure about that definition myself, because lots of games about planning make that sort of used to look to the future.
Right.
So,
I think games should require the right amount of planning. I think if you have to think too much, you get in the confusion state. Another thing that Dave Howell talks about in game design is that you want to avoid a medium-sized solution space. If you have a strategy game, either there should be very little strategy, so you can take your turn and get over it, or there should be so much possibility, not so much strategy, but so many possibilities that you don't feel compelled to seek out every one of them before you make the right move. The medium-sized solution space, the one, and there's different sizes for different groups, but the one where everyone feels like on their turn they need to waste everyone else's time picking the best move, only because everyone else is also going to do that, is a terrible place to be. But if it comes to your turn and you're like, wow, there's just so many possibilities here, I think this ought to work, and you go, that means your decision space is big enough that you're not being sort of frustrated into that I have to think this out mindset.
And yet, ironically, what you described before sounds an awful lot like Risk.
Well, yes, but Risk is much simpler than the kind of games that really fall into the trap. I think after a while of Risk, you can identify patterns and not have to think out every turn. Some gamers find themselves playing games where you have to think out every turn no matter how experienced you are. Not me. I don't play those games.
Yeah, I was going to say one definition of fun I've heard is for games, the process of making meaningful choices.
Right. And meaningful doesn't necessarily even mean within the context of the game. Meaningful could mean within the context of your social group.
Yeah, I mean, there's a metagame dynamic. Like one of the things we're talking about with having a reasonable chance to win is even if you're, say, playing against a chess grandmaster, you don't think about a reasonable chance to win that game. But
it depends on your definition of reasonable. You may believe that reasonable means 1 in 100, right? Reasonable and fair or reasonable and equal aren't the same thing in that case.
Not necessarily, but if you take the metagame and the idea that you're going to play 100 games of chess, eventually, perhaps you will beat him. You're probably not going to beat him in the first game. Right. You would have pretty much a zero chance of doing so. But by learning the game and playing it over the course of time, your intellectual level you think is up to par with his. You just need to gain the skills.
Well, and you're presuming then that through 100 games you would yourself get better at it. Not that you increase your odds over time, but that you actually get better at the game.
Right, and so in the 100th game, you might have the goal of winning at that point. So you've got a metagame dynamic.
That's something that is pretty powerful about why poker is popular, because you're not just getting better at the game, but you're specifically getting better against a particular opponent. It may apply to chess as well, but certainly my better experiences with poker, which is that you play the metagame, as you call it, to learn your opponent's patterns and then exploit them.
So does your theory of fun, or combined theory of fun, or analyses of fun?
I like to call it a grand unified theory of fun, and I hope someone names it after me.
Does this also apply to non-interactive stories?
Yes. Next question. Non-interactive stories meaning like books?
I mean, like the ongoing experience of trying to figure out what the heck is going on in Lost.
Maybe so, yes.
Okay. So
Because it definitely applies to games that are real from the is this thing real definition. Economic systems work like this too. If you feel like you have no chance to win based on the rules that are in front of you, you will check out of the system and do something else.
Right.
That is where crime comes from.
Right.
It's from a powerlessness within the structure of the real system.
much like the powerlessness of viewers if they suspect that the showrunners of Lost actually don't know what they're talking about.
Right. That's exactly right. You will check out. If you know the answer, you'll check out. Right? I tried to watch Twin Peaks again, but I just couldn't. You'll check out if you know the answer, but you'll also check out if you feel like no amount of thinky think is going to get you to the answer because they're just screwing around and making it up as they go along. Like, you want to really believe there's a backstory. We all want to believe there's more backstory to all of these fictional things than there really is. We like to invent it. That's part of what's fun about watching them. But then they make Star Wars episodes 1 through 3, and then we cry.
But there is a unique kind of fun to mastery as well, right? I mean, this is why we watch Star
certainly.
Trek Episode 4 a dozen times, or Star Wars A New Hope 1,000 times.
Is that why we do that? There is a fun associated with mastery, but mastery isn't quite the same thing as boredom, right? Boredom is knowing who done it. Mastery is more like being able to figure out who done it right before the detective does.
Well, there's mastery of exhibiting mastery of being able to solve something, but there's also mastery of a piece of content, right? It's like you have a mastery over a field of knowledge, like the Civil War, right? I mean, you know who won the Civil War, but mastering that content might be being able to memorize all the details of that.
Right.
But is that still fun?
It is, because there's always more details to learn.
Okay.
And certainly as you get to a certain depth of those details, you will find differing opinions about the actual truth of the matter. And so,
Okay.
in fact, I'm not sure the South didn't win. That's all I got. I don't know anything about the Civil War. I would have told a good joke there.
Well, I think it's interesting that we're talking a little bit about predictive games, like when you're watching Lost and you're trying to understand what happens. You're making predictions. In a sense, a gambling game like a slot machine is also a predictive game. You're predicting that
You're
have an opportunity for something to happen.
Right.
When you roll a d6, there's no skill necessarily involved. It's a game of I'm hoping the thing.
I like how you hedged that one. There's no skill at all. Trust me. That is what that example is meant to illustrate.
I've known some skilled.
I don't care about that guy. If that guy's real, I have to think of a different example.
But it's a predictive game, right? It's not a game of skill or challenge or
Uh,
decision making at that point. It's almost you're projecting a future story. I win.
Right. And that fiero, that I win moment, is what makes craps exciting, because in craps, or even in the game I have to roll a 6, everyone knows what they need, and when they see it, they know that's what they got. And there are some games where even after the random result happens, everyone has to look at it and think about it for a while and then decide, well, I think that's good for me. That would not make a craps table shout. And that's why craps is fun in that sense, that there's interactive, that everyone around the table, at least everyone who's betting with the shooter, they see the number and they go, woohoo, all at the same time. That's a great experience, and it only happens because the interpretation of the result is so simple. Yeah.
I was going to, first of all, I was going to say my favorite game of yours is the one that has been totally renamed.
Ah, yes.
Which, again, is fun not necessarily just because of the game mechanic, which brings me into my topic, which is sort of metagaming around the game. He did a game called, now called James Ernest's totally renamed spy game, which used to be called Before I Kill You, Mr. Bond, which I assume was what they told you right before they said you're going to rename this or else.
Yes. I'll tell you the extended story in a moment.
But the fun for us in playing that game isn't necessarily in doing the killing, but trying to figure out what kind of a global mega villain you are, and
Right.
why it is that you have a babe layer in your giant underground rumpus room of doom and all this kind of stuff. And it's the same kind of thing. I've got enough really highly verbal friends that when we play Balderdash, it's anybody's game. There's literally no way to figure out who is going to get the most points. And a lot of the time, it's the really unimaginative person who's like, it's a type of bird that wins. But the game has turned into, who the heck is Gerard Hee-Hee-Ho-Ho Buns? So we'll sit there for 5 minutes writing tinier and tinier and tinier writing on these tiny little sheets of paper, coming up with the whole story of how he invented the steam-powered vibrator and having a great time. And there's no chance you're going to win with this because everybody knows it's not the right one. So the goal has become something different, which is, can I get people to vote for me knowing that it's not the right answer?
Right.
Because, damn,
And that for a certain category of tabletop game, that is a really good way to design. That is to put in just enough seeds that people can start telling their own stories. Like in Dr. Lucky, no one told me why I hate him, so I can make that up. In the spy game, which shall be not named, I'll tell you the story in a minute. In the spy game, there's just enough seeds of good ideas, and of course you have the context, the James Bond movies, and so you can start making up your own funny, and that funny's different every time. It's much easier, well, not easier, it's much better to do it that way than to write a joke on every card, because if it's a full joke on every card, once you've read those, you're bored with at least with the humor of the game. You feel like you've seen it all, and the game hasn't really given you permission to go outside of that. It's better if you put in just the seeds and let people do what they want with them. There's a very difficult but very good game called Why Did the Chicken, which is a riddle writing game. It is the most scary on-the-spot mechanic. You have a random actor, a random verb. Why was the porcupine scared of the wedding? And it's just like, wow. I played this game, and for the first half of it, we were all just terrified, and we wrote things that we thought actually fit the stream of consciousness of the riddle, and we tried to, there's nothing funny about this. And the first half of our experience was horrible. And then we started realizing that going off the script and doing callbacks to earlier bad jokes and doing stuff that was completely tangential to the setup was the way to be funny, and suddenly it became the best game ever. So that game doesn't really give you as much permission as it should to go outside the box, but if you can do that, you get people being creative on their own. They have permission to be creative. They start having fun, and they have different fun every time. That's part of why you never get bored of a game like that. Now, I'll tell you the story. The card game was called Before I Kill You, Mr. Bond. It was the second game from Cheapass Games. It was back when we were young and foolish, and we thought if someone ever sends a cease and desist, we'll cease and desist. How hard is that? So MGM did send me a letter after 7 years of selling this game. And I had just printed another, 3,000 copies or something. And they gave me 3 months to sell it all. So I called all the distributors and I said, I have to stop selling this game, and here's why. And they snapped it up. That was great. And as an afterthought, they said, and he should probably pay some damages. And I was like, I asked my lawyer, which I had because of this letter. I don't normally have one, but at this moment I had a lawyer, and I said, how much is some? And he said, I don't know. They said less than 1,000. And I said, 400 is less than 1,000? Okay, and that's what I paid. So I sold my print run in a month, and I paid $400 in damages, and I had to change the name. And the winner of the contest, unfortunately, was unusable because it was What Part of Dr. No Don't You Understand? All right, next question. Yeah.
What's next for you after the book?
Well, the book looks like it's going to take forever, so I really don't have to make plans. I worked at the Amazing Society until a round of layoffs that happened about 3 weeks ago, and right now I am interviewing, but my expectation is I'm going to be doing freelance design, both on the board game side and the computer game side. I have been re-releasing a lot of my old titles as free downloads. They're all just still board games, so don't get your hopes up, but print and play on my website, and I eventually will be partnering with some publishers to do nice full versions of those same games. But yeah, that's all the plan I've got. I really want to finish my design book because I feel like it's, at this point, sort of the hole in my bio. I've written a couple of books before, but not really about game design, and I'm excited about getting it done. Yeah.
Sorry, somebody else.
Oh, is there someone else over here?
I have a question for you. How would you say your experience as a magician plays into the way that you approach game design? Do you think that those things are related?
This is an interesting question because it bears on a conversation I was having downstairs in a way you don't expect. I was not a magician, I was a juggler. And the main difference is that a juggler can tell you what he just did and you're still amazed. I was talking to someone from Zynga downstairs about how they acquire more customers, and it's very analytical, and they have a whole lot of data and a whole lot of magic that they can do behind the scenes to, as far as I'm concerned, trick people into giving them more money. So I don't feel like that's very honest game design. Like I like to design a game that I myself would want to play, and if it's a kind of game that I don't typically like to play, I try to learn why people like it and actually like it myself before I get too deep into trying to design it. Whereas, if I were doing it all with smoke and mirrors, I would just put out 1 million copies, A/B test the hell out of it, and then make whatever local maximum I landed on and say, that is a good game because it made me rich. So my background as a juggler has something to do with that sort of more honest approach to inventing new games. And if you're here from Zynga, and I'm in the interview process down there, by the way, so I'm not using my real name. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, some of your game concepts, you say you start with the idea, and then you come up with...
Yes, and if you're going to throw a counterexample at me,
No.
let's tangle.
I was going to say, how on earth do you, I mean, what kind of drugs do you have to take to come up with things like fighting off heads and...
So here's the drugs that I take. If you know that you're in a business of creating intellectual property and trying to sell it, you keep a notebook with you all the time. And when someone tells a joke, or even better, you tell a joke yourself, then you know that you made it up. You write it down. That's all. I go to the notebook. There's all kinds of good story ideas and all kinds of joke names in there. Captain Park's Imaginary Polar Expedition was really me misreading the first line of a trailer for a documentary about Shackleton. And from that, and a little bit of Blackadder, and a little bit of making it up as I went, Captain Park's Imaginary Polar Expedition is a story about a bunch of adventurers, or would-be adventurers, who are going to pretend that they've gone on grandiose adventures, but are actually just hiding in London and collecting stuff from antique shops. So that's you just do it. Yeah, everyone has good ideas. I think another thing about creativity that I would like to share with you is that you have 2 brains in your head, and they are constantly at odds. And one of them is the adult brain, and one of them is the child brain. The child brain thinks everything is awesome. The child brain loves pirates and zombies and really wants to make another game with pirates and zombies in it. The adult brain, whom I'm pretty sure you're more familiar with, says the world does not need another game with pirates and zombies in it. That is the end of your creative loop. Shut the adult up. He needs to leave the room. When you are brainstorming, the meaning of the phrase, there is no such thing as a bad idea, is not what it seems on the face. There are plenty of bad ideas. But if you don't give the good ideas time to mature, you're never going to find them. So the kid needs to decide what's awesome about the game, not just that it's pirates and zombies, but what do pirates and zombies do that's awesome, that you want to make a game about? I played plenty of games about pirates that are not about pirates. So make one that really is. What is awesome about that to you? Once you've developed it, once you know what's fun about it, once you have an ember of fun that you know is not going to blow out, then let the grown-up come in and finish the thing, because the one thing the kid cannot do is finish anything. The grown-up's are very critical. He knows how to test things. He knows how to write cohesive sentences. He knows how to finish this product. But unless the kid is there in the room to tell him why it's awesome, he's going to forget about it, and he's going to write it off, and he's going to do something else.
We have time for one last question. You ready?
Yeah.
What's your favorite Bill Murray movie?
Groundhog Day.
Groundhog Day?
Ask me what my favorite movie is.
What's your
Groundhog Day.
We have time for two. Last question.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to what we talked about before about sort of, emergent metagame fun and things. To sort of get at the idea of like griefing and stuff like that. Sort of, you can have emergent fun that is good for everyone, and you can have people like the guy I knew on Xbox Live whose call sign in Halo was Bitch Slayer, whose fun is I win and everyone else loses.
Sorry. It was a bad time in my life.
So
It's vitamin D deficiency. Can you believe it?
I can't.
Well, so
So how do you sort of guide?
it's difficult. The online environment, as we all know, turns ordinary people into terrible people, and it brings them all together in a way that they can somehow affect your life. And so, as hard as it is to deal with people in the real world, we have a social contract. I made this argument. I went to work for a guy named Dave Albert at Carbonated Games, and we had this argument in my interview, which lasted for hours beyond the interview itself, which was this. I said to him, and sort of just to see what he would say, but I said to him that all computer games are one-player games. Because as people get involved in fads, and like, what about World of Warcraft is a multiplayer game? Millions of people play that game. Yes, but you treat someone on the other side of a cable very differently than you treat someone on the other side of a table. The person that you're playing with is trash. He is a slave. He's a subordinate. He's just as bad as the computer AI that you were playing role-playing games against 5 years ago. So I don't know exactly how to deal with it except to say that you're playing games with friends. Playing social games with friends is much less griefable than playing social games with everybody. But that's how you control who you play with in real life, too. You don't just go to a bus stop and say, who wants to play a board game? But effectively, that's what you're doing on the internet, and you're getting what you're asking for.
Ladies and gentlemen, James Ernest.
Thank you.